Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Detroit Regional Chamber's Tele-Town Hall series. For those of you who are on computer, we've decided to let you into our living rooms or dens or basements or kitchens, and you can see some of us on video today. So welcome. First and foremost, we certainly hope that you and your family and your colleagues are healthy and well, and not going overly stir crazy staying at home, but we do appreciate you all staying at home. Today, we are very pleased to welcome Representative Andy Levin to our program. Representative Levin represents the 9th District in Michigan, which covers partly my corner of the world of St. Clair Shores up to Hall Road, over to Royal Oak, and kind of in a very odd circular pattern, points of Bloomfield and other places. Those of us on the west side, on the east side, definitely call that far west side. So Congressman Levin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be with you, Sandy. Thanks.
So first of all, you obviously have a big posse at home. Everyone's well and good and haven't killed each other yet?
Yes, thanks so much for asking, Sandy. We're all blessed. We're good. You know, my dad is 88 and my uncle and aunt are in their 80s and they're doing well. They're being compliant and sequestering themselves. I take groceries over to my dad in Royal Oak, and you know, so they're all really good. And we've got 3 kids at home again all of a sudden. I mean, we have a 9th grader, but our college senior and our grad student are home finishing up their degrees. So that's a little silver lining for Mary and me for sure.
Well, great. Well, we're glad your family's well, and please give your father and your uncle our very best. You know, we owe, and all of us in Michigan owe them so much for their incredible public service, and we thank you for your continued public service, Andy.
You're welcome. I will. Thanks, Sandy.
So let's talk about what's going on in Washington. Washington obviously came together, I think, certainly faster in this crisis than it did during the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. The CARES package is certainly a pretty monumental set of assistance. Talk to us about the CARES package, the 2 that have been passed so far, and what you see going into the future in terms of assistance to individuals and small businesses in particular.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Well, you know, I'm really glad that we've passed 4 major pieces of legislation. I mean, it's the biggest assistance packages in the history of our country on a bipartisan basis. And you know, we're certainly not done. I mean, the level of this crisis is something like we've never seen before. So, I mean, speaking specifically about business, I mean, first of all, I want to just point out that I used to be a member of your flock, in the sense that for the 8 years before running for Congress, I founded and ran a small business called Lean and Green Michigan, you know, right in Detroit. And we help other businesses do kind of radical clean energy makeovers of their properties to reduce their operating costs. And of course, I'm not involved in it at all anymore, but they're still out there trying to keep going in the midst of this pandemic. So you know, I just feel for all of my brother and sister business owners out there, or people who are trying to keep their businesses going, keep their people employed, you know, have some prospect of keeping their doors open, or when could they get them open again. And you know, in terms of what we've done, you know, the CARES Act, I had multiple pieces in it for business. We had the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and the Emergency Economic Injury Grants. And you know, briefly, I mean, PPP, I think, you know, most of your members know it provides cash flow assistance through 100% federally guaranteed loans to employers who maintain their payrolls during the emergency. The biggest feature of it is that it's forgivable, and you can use it for up to 8 weeks of payroll, and employee retention, salaries. There's no SBA fees on it, and you can get at least 6 months of deferral with maximum deferral up to a year if you don't if you do need to pay it back. And then the Small Business Debt Relief Program provides immediate relief to small businesses with non-disaster SBA loans like 7As, 504s, and microloans. And under this, the SBA will cover all loan payments on these loans, including principal, interest, fees for 6 months. Not delay it, cover it. And it's also available to new borrowers who take out loans within 6 months of the president signing the CARES Act into law. And then we have the EIDLs, which is an emergency advance of up to $10,000 for small businesses and private nonprofits, and they could self-certify and qualify within 3 days. So then on April 23rd, we added to what we did in the CARES Act with a sort of a stopgap measure. We'll probably pass a CARES 2 in the coming days, but this is called the Paycheck Protection Program and Health Care Enhancement Act. And here we, as everybody knows, the PPP ran out of money, so we put $310 billion of additional funding in there, including $30 billion reserved for community-based lenders, small banks, and credit unions, and $30 billion for medium-sized banks and credit unions. We felt that the way the administration did it, it wasn't helping the smallest businesses, and so we wanted to earmark at least $60 billion of it to lenders who are really going to focus on, the truly small businesses. So there've been a lot of challenges getting this assistance up and running, and a lot of my time, Sandy's just been spent problem solving with small businesses themselves, with banks and credit unions to try to get this to work. And that's an ongoing issue. Then I just want to mention that, on the Education and Labor Committee, where I serve as vice chair, we've been doing a lot of work on workforce development generally, and then specifically, I've been working on standing up a national contact tracing workforce, which we have to do with tremendous immediacy. So today, in 25 minutes, we're introducing the Relaunching America's Workforce Act. I'm working with our chairman, Bobby Scott, and others on this, and it's going to be a necessary investment into our workforce and our career and technical education systems. So that's coming, and hopefully will be part of CARES 2. And then I want to talk about the investment we need to make in America's public health workforce. I partnered with Senator Warren to propose the Coronavirus Containment Corps, a plan to put in place really a truly national contact tracing strategy. We need to test, trace, isolate, and support people if we want to keep this pandemic, this virus under control, or else we'll just have wave upon wave of infection, because we need to restart our economy. We can't just isolate like this, everybody staying at home. So we would put many tens of thousands, maybe between 150 and 200,000 Americans back to work, working with our local, what we call Michigan Works, our local workforce agencies, workforce boards, and our local public health agencies to help people with figure out who's been infected and contacting all the people that they've been in close contact with. It's an incredibly patriotic, positive way to have public health be the leading edge of reopening the economy, Sandy. Not only would we employ those people, but then we'd need hotels. Instead of having them be closed, we could pay them to reopen, employ their people to house people who need to be isolated. We could pay restaurants to feed the people who need to be isolated. So a public health response can be a big part of this. The name Coronavirus Containment Corps, CCC, obviously echoes work that FDR did in the Great Depression, putting hundreds of thousands of Americans to work through the Civilian Conservation Corps. And we have to have that level of imagination and sort of unity and patriotism to get through this. And I've just been blown away by our companies, our unions stepping up in across the board to try to help in this crisis, whether it's a distillery making, sanitizers, hand sanitizer, or, companies large and small getting involved with making ventilators and PPP and personal protective equipment, PPE, and so forth. So I know we could do this if we stick together. And but the bottom line is you'll see Congress come together to try to pass a CARES 2 package in the coming couple weeks, and it'll have a tremendous amount of assistance for state and local governments.
Great. Congressman, that was a great, I really appreciate that. I do want to talk about the healthcare work that you're doing with Senator Warren, but before I get to that, I want to dive a little bit more into the Paycheck Protection Program. We have a lot of small business owners on the line. You know a lot of them. So one of the questions that we have is, how has the second round of PPP funding unfolded in your district? Are small businesses getting access to those loans that they didn't get in the first round? What are you seeing in your district?
Well, the launch of the round 2 was very problematic, frankly, and we had a lot of people in my district were very frustrated. Everything crashed in the first days. I heard from, both on the banking side and on the businesses trying to get the money side, there was a lot of problems. There were a lot of problems, but now a lot of businesses have gotten through and have gotten money, and also nonprofits. I mean, let's remember that nonprofits are eligible for this too, which is completely unprecedented. We've never done that before. And by the way, I know this, your members, you may care about this more than them, but I'm trying to bring labor and business together so that we can get aid to 501c5s and 501c6s, because some of the chambers, which are C6s, right, have had a very difficult time, and I think they should be eligible for some of this aid too. But so we are having more businesses get aid, but this money's going to run out too, Sandy. I mean, in a couple weeks or less. So
Right.
It's going to be ongoing pain.
Yeah, no, and actually that's my perfect lead into my next question. So yes, the second round of PPP funds will probably be depleted in the next few days, let alone few weeks. So what is the process of getting kind of the next tranche of funding? Obviously, Senate Leader McConnell has kind of made a line in the sand, if you will, saying that he's not really in favor of additional funding, or he's put some restrictions on it. What are the mechanics of the House and the Senate coming together in a way that Secretary Mnuchin and the President will sign off on for another round of small business support?
Well, I think you may find this next round a little different than the earlier ones. It's possible that the House will pass a bill and the Senate will pass a bill, and we'll have the more traditional kind of negotiations between the two houses. There still is a chance that we would pass a bipartisan, come together, but given Leader McConnell's posture, it seems more difficult. So the next immediate thing you're likely to see is massive help for state governments and local governments. And, I've introduced legislation with Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado, Congressman Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, and Congressman Tom Malinowski of New Jersey to get $250 billion of aid to local governments, cities, townships, and counties under 500,000, because the earlier aid was just through the state stabilization funds, just for states, and then the governments of 500,000 or more, which in Michigan, there's 4 counties that are that big: Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Kent. So 79 are not. And then we have 1 city. So like in the 9th congressional district, where there's 21 municipalities, none of them got any help from that. And I don't care if you're tiny like Pleasant Ridge or pretty big like Warren or Sterling Heights or the city of Detroit, the overtime and the sick time necessary for people who are positive, or whatever, their budgets are completely blown to smithereens, and they need help too. So you'll see us come forward with help for the state governments, federal government, I mean state, local governments, postal service, and additional help for individuals, and we'll negotiate with the Senate Majority Leader and the White House. Mr. Mnuchin's been, pretty easy for the House to negotiate with, really. So that's really been a hopeful sign in terms of bipartisanship. I'm hopeful that additional assistance to business actually might be a way to bring people together, because there's been particular resistance to helping the public sector from some quarters. And I'm hoping that, maybe additional assistance to business could be something that unifies the two parties, but we'll have to see.
Right, no, I appreciate that, Congressman. Looking kind of more of a Michigan view right now, you've been supportive of Governor Whitmer and her continuing stay-at-home order. We're starting to see a little bit more tension out in the community now between, people who are kind of anxious to get out of their homes, but also businesses that are very anxious to start up. You're a small business guy. You know the concerns that small businesses are facing across the state. What do you think is the right path right now for balancing our critical public health issues with balancing our critical economic and employment issues?
Well, I feel like there's actually been incredible unity here, and that if you look at surveys of parents, 70% of Michigan parents don't want their, schools to reopen before, they're solid with the governor's decision. And I think it's terrific the way that she's called the business community together, right? Big business, medium business, smaller business, labor's in there, and said to them, you help me figure this out. And step by step, using public health science, she is starting to reopen things. And I think she's going to continue along that path. I don't think there's another one. And if to the extent that you've got people, running around the state capitol, I mean, Sandy, I cannot see that as representing mainstream Michiganders. There's Nazi symbols, literally. I mean, as a Jewish person, it's been horrifying comparing, literally people among those demonstrators have compared what she's doing to the Holocaust, to Hitler. Obviously, it was quite political. And I think she's just basically saying, I'm the executive. I'm the one who has to make these decisions. I'm going to make them on the basis of saving people's lives. This is a really sad week. This week we passed the Vietnam War in terms of deaths from this COVID-19 crisis. In the United States, just from very late February, basically the months of March and April, right? We lost more people to COVID-19 and Michigan we lost more people than we lost as a state to the Vietnam War. So I still take this as first and foremost is saving lives. And then, the way we reopen has got to be driven by science and public health. Our whole delegation, bipartisan, had a tremendous call with Jim Hackett earlier this week. And I'm super impressed by how seriously our businesses are taking the question of what they need to do to reopen in a way that will be sustainable. I mean, after all, if they reopen and then people get sick and they have to close again, it's going to be horrible for their business. So I feel like we're working together really well on this. And the governor I saw the meme what is it? The meme about her, Big Gretch or something. I don't know. I just think, look, you've got Republican governors in Ohio and many other states, Democratic governors. This isn't about politics. They're the chief executives of their state, and they're making these decisions almost, from Washington State to New York, in a sober kind of public health oriented way. And I take my hats off to them, Republicans and Democrats. The vast majority of them doing a tremendous job, I feel like.
Well, before I turn it over to Brad Williams, my colleague, for some questions from the audience, I'll just note that in our statewide poll at the Detroit Regional Chamber, Governor Whitmer had a 57% approval rating for her actions, and Fox News has her at 63%. So I agree with you. Most of the Michiganders feel like she's doing a good job. So Brad, I know we've got questions from our audience. Turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Congressman, for all the work that you're doing home, but in DC as well. You know, we've weren't able to visit you this year as part of the Great Lakes Metro Chambers Coalition, but we've had some questions about what does recovery look like and how do we get Michigan back to work. And one of the things that we've advocated for in the Great Lakes Metro Chambers Coalition, and there's been some inquiries on about getting people back to work, is infrastructure and the possibility of getting some real infrastructure spending going to get people back to work. Do you think, you know, if we fast forward maybe 6 months beyond, you know, once we get past the crisis and getting people back to work, is that something that maybe we can get some serious conversation behind in the not too distant future?
So you broke up for me there for a minute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I heard in 6 months, what can we maybe have a conversation about?
Infrastructure to get people back to work.
All right. So that is a really important question. And I feel super strongly that we need to move forward as a country, as a state, as a metro area with major infrastructure investment. And it's going to be a big way that we recover from this pandemic economically. So I'm talking about our roads and bridges. I'm talking about our sewers and our water infrastructure, but also, you know, the whole question of greening our economy and of economic justice and really having everybody making their best economic contributions. So this pandemic has exposed something that we already knew about, but the digital divide. I mean, we can't, I was just talking to Peter Jacoby at AT&T. We cannot have so many rural kids and kids in the city not have access. 600,000 kids in Michigan, almost a third of the kids don't have access to either a device or you know, connectivity. So broadband's got to be a big part of it. And then, you know, this crisis has shown us what our Earth might look like if we polluted less and moved more quickly towards a renewable energy economy. And you've seen our own utilities, big utilities, lead on this, advancing their goals on this. So, for example, Brad, I launched a bill called the EV Freedom Act, the Electric Vehicles Freedom Act, earlier this year. And it's a big infrastructure piece. It calls on the Secretary of Transportation to map out what we would need to have in terms of high-speed chargers throughout the national highway system so that you could get in an electric vehicle in, you know, Bloomfield Township or St. Clair Shores, and I could call up Sandy, say, hey, you ever been to the Florida Keys? You know, what the heck? Let's go to Vegas and wait, you know, blow our money. And that's the most American of things, right? Get in your car and go. But I'm telling you, I've been, I'm sure you probably did, Sandy. I've been to the GM Design Dome and the other companies and all these amazing EVs they're building. Average person ain't buying them if they can't go visit grandma in Omaha. And so this infrastructure is crucial to our industry. And Brad, that's just another example. So I can tell you that Chairman Peter DeFazio of the of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee is ready to go with a major proposal, and I hope we get to it later in the spring. I really do.
When this happens, you and Sandy and I are all going to roll to Vegas together if you'll let me go. I would be honored. I would be honored to ride in the back seat of this epic road trip. We've got a question. I know you
covered the losses, Brad.
What? We've got a question. I know you touched on it earlier about, you know, assistance for state and local governments, and it seems to have been a bit of a flashpoint between Senator McConnell and maybe some in the House as to what aid to state and local governments looks like. Could you touch on maybe what some of the conflict is and how we get beyond that? Because I know just in Michigan, we're looking at potentially $3 billion for the state government annually out of a $10 billion general fund. And as someone who works with state government on a day-to-day basis, I can't even imagine what those types of cuts, what the ramifications of those could be. So if you could touch on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so here's the beautiful thing about politics. Our country, Democrats are more concentrated in major metros and Republicans are more spread out. So like, just think of our own Michigan, we have 600 some local governments, 83 counties, right? And then this, all the states that are hurting from this, like as you gave the example of our own state. So I actually think that this is not going to be, I don't think Leader McConnell's statement reflects like this is where Republicans are and this is where Democrats are. For example, on Monday, I'm doing a national forum. It's not formally speaking a hearing on the Coronavirus Community Relief Act that I mentioned, the bill to help the vast majority of counties and cities and townships below 500,000 population. On that forum with me will be some Democrats, but I'm going to have Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio. I think I'm going to have Representative Tipton of Colorado. I think Fred Upton might join us. I mean, a bunch of Republicans around this, they fully agree with us. So I'm hopeful, Brad, that we will put together a package that really quite a few senators on both sides of the aisle will go for. Maybe there'll be some, dickering over the exact dollar figures or something, but we're going to provide major relief for states and local governments on a bipartisan basis if I have anything to do with it. And I honestly feel like it's not going to be, a big partisan thing in the end. That's my hope anyway.
The last question I have for you, and this is not necessarily issue specific, but we have an individual in the chat who is, I'm sure, not a constituent of yours because he's having trouble getting answers from his member of Congress. What is your advice to someone who maybe is not getting the help he needs from his or her member of Congress? Where do they go next? Where do they go to get the help that they need? Of course, we're trying as a chamber staff to help folks as much as we can, but if they don't have a chamber membership, or what's your advice as a member of Congress who is doing a good job at reaching out to their constituents? What's your advice?
Well, let me just say that we work collegially with all the other members, Republicans and Democrats in all of Michigan. We talk, all of us, I mean, this week, I think I've been on 2 calls with both of our senators and all, maybe not every person was there, but all 14 of our reps. And so let me just tell you what our practice is in my office, and then let me make an offer for this person. In my office, of course, the office is physically closed, right? When this crisis hit, I got laptops that are like official laptops set up to get through the House firewall for every one of my staff people in DC in the district and ordered them all to work at home. And that's what they're still doing. And if anyone calls our DC phone line or our district phone line, every hour on the hour for all the business day, they're picked up and they're fielded out to whatever the appropriate staff person is. And that's how we do it. And so it's not like calling UI or the SBA, like we call you back right away. It's just not a thing. So I would invite anybody to call my district office. You can call, it doesn't matter if you're in our district. The number is 586-498-7122. That's 586-498-7122. And nobody should think like we're going to go behind the back of your member or trash talk them or anything. We'll work cooperatively with them, but we will help you get your problem solved one way or the other. So, and nobody should hesitate to do that, Brad, really. That's why we're there.
Great, thank you. I will put a plug in too. We just posted a blog on the chamber website, detroitchamber.com/COVID-19, that was co-authored by my friend and a friend of the chamber, Sarah Hubbard, who's a lobbyist that we work with in Lansing, that gives some tips on using your influence in this moment too, that may be helpful to folks. So Sandy, I'll hand it back to you. And thank you, Congressman, for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Brad. It's good to see you there.
Brad, thank you so much. I will note we have, I'm just looking at the questions here on my screen. I know we've got a whole bunch of questions that we didn't get to. We've tried to respond to a handful of them, myself and the staff. We will capture these questions and we'll try to get back to you after the fact. Brad Williams and his team will do that, and as appropriate, we'll forward questions over to the Congressman and his staff. With that, Congressman, I know you've got a hard stop at noon. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us, but more importantly, thank you for your public service. We appreciate everything that you do and your commitment to the interests of Michigan.
Thanks, Sandy. So, we also have staff on the call, so our staff will work with yours to get all the questions answered. And I just have to tell you personally, you look great. It's really good to see you. And I hope you and your family are doing well, and that everybody within the reach of my voice stays safe, stays out of circulation to the extent you can, and we're all in this together, so we're going to get through it.
Great. Andy, thank you so much. Have a great day. Best to your family.
Take care.
All right, bye. Bye now. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.